Very good evening, everyone. I welcome all of you for our one very important session on GAPSULE, an initiative by DocMore. GAPSULE, a first of an industry dialogue series aimed at bridging the knowledge gap between the pharmaceutical industry and medical practitioners for better treatment outcomes. Today's session is very important for us. It is circumventing some of the important aspects of marketing, and in marketing also very specific in the pharma range. And in the current world and the current time, every pharmaceutical industry is working on the brand perspective marketing plans so that they can implement in the coming financial year. This session will help us to identify the core marketing ideologies, how these ideologies can be converted into campaigns, and these successful campaign obviously will hit the bullseye, that is their stakeholders, patients, HCPs, etc., which are our decision makers also. So this session is going to be quite interesting for everyone, even for me also, because this session provides a lot of insights. And to take this session forward, we have a very eminent panelist with us, and we are fortunate that these two eminent panelists have taken out of their busy schedule time to us, because these two panelists have given a lot of good understanding, good consultations, great campaigns in the pharmaceutical industries. Only to that, I would like to welcome Mr. Vivek Hattangadi, sir. He's a chief mentor at the Enablers and PharmaState Academy. Mr. Vivek, sir, has 48 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, with 14 years in sales and sales management, 16 years in corporate industry, over 18 years as an independent pharmaceutical consultant in pharmaceutical brand management and sales management. He has written entire curriculum and study material for the MBA course in management for Vidyasagar University, West Bengal. He has been a guest faculty at 4 pharma management B schools. Mr. Vivek sir has written books for pharma industry, total communication, the DNA of effective communication, which is going to be very interesting if Vivek sir will provide some glimpse of it, and how to get doctors addicted to your brands, 13 unshakable laws of pharmaceutical branding. I'm glad that in today's meeting, Mr. Vivek sir is here to provide their subject matter knowledge to all of us. Welcome, Mr. Vivek sir, on this
Thank
panelist.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Another very eminent panelist with us is Mr. Prashant Menon. Welcome, Mr. Prashant Menon, sir, founder director, Workplace Dynamics. He has a 25 years of stint of corporate experience in healthcare industry, where he began his journey in sales and then moved into marketing and general management. He's a founder director at Workplace Dynamics, which is multidisciplinary management consulting and leadership development company. Mr. Prashant has completed his 2 postgraduate programs in marketing after a bachelor's degree in microbiology and a faculty at NMIMS. And Mr. Prashant has 3 international certified coaching credentials from ICF, ACC, Marshall Goldsmith Coaching, and the Global Coach Group. Last but not the least, a recipient of Top 100 Marketing Influence in 2016, is recognized by World Marketing Congress, and he is often invited and valued leadership and strategy speaker at various industry and academy forums in India. Glad to see you, sir, here for such an important session in the very important season of pharmaceutical brand marketing.
Thank you so much, Udit.
Pleasure all. And the most important aspect which we would like to speak on today, we know marketing is not just doing the right marketing of your brand. It's important how that is well conceived by your end consumer. And in the pharmaceutical marketing, it's very important. The right message on the patient's point of view is very important. Some of the key likings which we have seen in the pharmaceutical brand marketing have been circumventing about the brands, and there are some challenges also. So one of the main important questions today I would like to start asking from Prashant, should pharmaceutical company continue to focus more on healthcare professionals? If yes, why and how does it benefit?
Thanks, Udit, and of course, it's glad to share the stage with Vivek sir. He's always an inspiration to all of us.
Correct.
Pharmaceutical brands will continue to focus with HCPs as a major front runner because you like it or not, today they happen to be your decision makers in the journey. There is a change. There is a change that is rapidly happening in the industry across. But because you're a very genericized market, a lot of stakes where your brands generally land up is at the decision makers hand, which is currently your HCPs. Now, what's important? If you look at the way we've seen the brands get slotted, broadly they get slotted into three types the industry is aware of, which is typically the acute, the subchronic, and the chronic. And each of these, let's say, kitty of brands or the buckets has a very different template in the way you actually operate and the way you try and get hold of HCPs there. Because come what may, there are some brands that actually quite often fall between the acute and the subacute or the subchronic, kitty. And if you look at brands that very typically cross more than a 2 to 4 week kind of a prescription tenure, can very easily be taken for a much longer time, which could be around a couple of months as well. And that's where a confusion on is your brand acute or is your brand subchronic? And one would love to treat it as subchronic, where the HCP decides on how it needs to be taken. That's point number one. And second point is, in a large population in India, the patients also finally take their own decision to either continue the brand and not go back for a second consult to the physician. And that makes it even interesting for brands where they begin to start getting used in more than a month scenario. It gives the company or the brand a strong case in point to start connecting with the final users, which is your consumers, which is your patients. So this is a dichotomy which I think brand managers today face in where do you actually start slotting your product in terms of what's your audience you want to really service. So the healthcare practitioners, I would suggest that we as brand managers, as marketers, need to spend a lot of time, profiling them. Profiling them has got even more difficult. Profiling them has got even more complex in the last 3 years. We all know it. But have we changed the way we profile customers? I am yet to see a radical change in the way we start profiling customers. And probably this could be the death knell for a lot of brands that are not strong already. When I say not strong, if you're not a multi-crore brand, you could actually run the risk of getting exposed by not having a very strong presence in the HCP's mind for a prescription. So it is important for you to go back and revisit and go to your drawing board and start asking the question, who's my consumer? Or what do I know about my consumer? And it is better that you slot the customer as the HCP and the consumer as a patient, and probably you then start getting a far more sharper picture on how brands need to be positioned or campaigns need to be driven.
A very valid point about the customer and consumer point of view by Prashant sir. Idea is how, in which kind of segment you actually put the right funnel into it, because in the acute segment, in the subchronic segment, in the chronic segment, the prescription behavior changes because of the duration of therapy. So obviously patient's decision making comes up. If he's comfortable in terms of taking that particular therapy for a long time, they are intact with it. So ultimately, if you have a right prescription behavior from the HCP point of view, you're making your brand for the longevity purpose. Vivek sir, what is your point of view when it comes to patient angle? How much patient is now having a decision making procedure when it comes to, let's say, chronic segment and subchronic segment?
Now, first, I would like to agree with Prashant sir. And when he said today, the SCPs are the decision makers. But when you look a little forward, when you look, say, about 10 years hence or 15 years hence, the therapy is entirely going to change. There's a slow shift towards biopharma and the biosimilars. And when we have biopharma and biosimilars dominating the market, the trend is obvious everywhere in the world, including India. When we have biopharmaceuticals and biosimilars which are going to rule the world in the near future, patients also become very, very, very important apart from the SCPs. And therefore, I have coined a new word called paradoxus. All these years, ever since the first medical representative, he went to the doctor, the pharma industry has always been focusing on the doctors. And there is nothing wrong because the doctors are the decision makers. But who ultimately pays for the drugs? Why do I exist today? Why does Prashant also exist today? Because of the revenues which have been generated for the organizations where we work, and the revenues are generated by the patients. And therefore, patients will remain, or rather, patients should be made as our consumers. Patients, the end consumers, and doctors, the influencers. So both patients and doctors are going to be our customers and consumers in future, and that is why the word paradoxus, which I have coined. A little later, when we come to even what you call as a personalized medicine, patients and the relations between the pharma company, they are going to be totally different than what it is today. For the next few years, maybe 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, the current trend will continue. But I'm looking at 2030, I'm looking at 2035, 2040, when the biosimilars and the biological products are going to dominate, and we have more and more of personalized medicines coming in. That's the time pharma company will have to look at patients of consumers, and therefore this beginning has to be made today, whether it is the brand managers, whether it's the field managers, or more importantly, the training managers. They have to have a change in the mindset and start looking at the patients as our consumers. That's my take.
Absolutely, sir. I think biosimilar market has changed the dynamics quite a lot. First, biosimilar, which were the kidney problems, CKD problems, the erythropoietin market, which has start changing the conceptualization in terms of the price, veracity, and the moment then it start getting entered into the super specialty segment. What is very important is this segment is still being niche, and the decision maker obviously starts from the HCP perspective because they would like to see the quality level, the kind of data points, what's been there in biosimilar. But what is very important to understand from the acute and chronic segment, where if there is a launch, there is a off patent of any XYZ drug, then complete market goes into the price veracity and how fast you can grab your customer. That makes the market more interesting. That brand acknowledgement which was there for a long time before the patent and after the patent was really down. So what is that particular nudge or a gap, how that particular big brand can nullify that? Any particular perspective, Prashant sir, on it?
While I come to this point, I just wanted to add a little more to what I think Sir put up. I think we need to start looking at patients not only from a chronic window, we also need to start looking at it from an acute window. Now, in acute, if you move away products, there are a lot of products that are acute, but that are not as serious as probably an anti-infective therapy, where you'd ideally want to know what's the bioculture before you choose the right kind of antibiotic. But let's look at pain, let's look at PPI, let's look at multivitamins. Today, these are products that actually hover between acute to subchronic. Now, what happens is, as a marketeer, am I profiling patients who start using them? Because, come on, all the three on the screen here in the last 2 months would have picked up a painkiller or an anti-allergic off the shelf. We wouldn't have gone for a consult. And that was purely an acute product, right? Now, absolutely, what happens is, we are not talking about educated or let's say the pharma people. We are talking about the general layman. I remember people when I was marketing the asthma products, I would look at doctors complaining of people over the counter taking steroid drugs, which are tablets, which are typically your, let's say your betamethasone tablets and all. And your chest physicians had a huge problem because a steroid tablet is like a wonder pill. You take the medication and you start feeling better. So forget the hardcore inhaled medications, which needed a lot of education. The patients walk up to a chemist and start buying off the counter steroid tablets until he starts getting a very bad attack and lands up into the hospital. So what happens is, even in acute management, there is enough that brand management can do to start profiling patients, because are you finding out a reason to stay connected to the patients is what is important. And that's where I would like to add on to what sir had left with. The biosimilars is a story that will come, and insurance will start playing a bigger role in the next 2 decades in India, because India is a predominantly out of pocket expenses country, where 60-65% of the drugs are purchased from our own kitty. But as and how the insurance payers start piling on and start increasing their presence, we will start seeing these high end products getting its footage very strong in India. So that's a little talk to what sir had put up. Coming to the question about you in terms of how big brands can start leveraging, I read about this concept and I thought it was very relevant for us. We all know about storytelling, right? Storytelling is what we do at all points of time. You have a brand story to tell. You walk into the clinic and tell a story and get the doctor hooked onto your product. Big brands need to start moving from storytelling to story making. And why they need to start moving to story making is, who is going to start creating or who's going to make newer stories? It is the big brands who've got the power. It is the big brands who've got the kind of leverage, equity in the market. They need to start working on it. And barring a few that we can talk about, I don't see story making being taken by Indian top brands very seriously. There was one great attempt. We all know about the story that thyroid was managed so beautifully by let's say by Abbott at one point of time. Cipla doing it in respiratory has been very strong. But let's really look at what stories have they made. They have created an ecosystem where therapies could be better understood. They've made an ecosystem where diagnosis could be faster. They've created an ecosystem where products accessibility and information was improved to a great extent. But coming forward, how many big brands, rather than looking at a pure market share increase, how many big brands are making stories for a therapy, for a disease category, for a better understanding and diagnosis category? That's one where I think marketers would need to put their heads into and start actually creating those story makers in the industry. And I would see there's a very strong let's say objective behind that, which will help them to take their brands much ahead in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. So means like, if your big brands, they start working on the overall whole ecosystem, the loop of all kind of stakeholders, be it a patient, be it like a decision maker, be it like a channel or a logistic support, everywhere, if they connect on the brand, not only the brand perspective, disease perspective, the patient awareness perspective is very much well taken care of. The longevity of remembrance of that particular brand will never go off. Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. But that veracity, that challenge, what big brands marketeers should take, that is something has to go at the next level. That's very sure. My another question to Vivek sir is, we know that conventional elements like direct marketing, conferences, what we do, participate to showcase our brand, noise levels, the sponsorship, generally dominate a lot of the marketing resources of any kind of brand campaigns. But after the COVID, still that particular element is very much well accepted. But how much shift of brand marketing resources you see into it, and how much innovative ways can we spotlight it into such kind of brand campaigns?
That's a very interesting question, Udit. The way we do the CMs today, say at national conferences, that way has to change. And our entire approach towards marketing has to change. In the campaigns of the future, I'm not talking of today, but I'm always talking about the future. For the future, we need to keep the patient at the center of all the activities. We need to keep the patient at the center of all our activities and design our campaigns accordingly. Now, when you talk about patient-centric marketing, yeah, so all the marketing activities, not just the marketing activities, but even the activities, say at the levels of F&D or HR, they have to focus on how best can the patient outcome improve. The focus has to be on the wellness and how best the patient outcome improves. If we develop that kind of mindset and then we act accordingly, we can really build big brands. Because through patient centric marketing, which is a natural outgrowth of H2H marketing, patient centric marketing is going to have a rub-off effect not only on the brand but even on the patient. A patient would like to, I mean, everybody would like the patient to remain loyal to the brand. There are so many options which are available. For today example, my wife was taking Shelcal so far. And then suddenly when I ordered a Shelcal from, what you call, not 1mg, Pharmacy, they gave me a call. Sir, Sipcal 500 is also available. It's from a good company called Cipla. And that's available at almost 70% of the cost of Shelcal. I didn't have any brand loyalty. My wife did not have any brand loyalty towards Shelcal. Okay, send me Sipcal. That's no problem. But when you have patient-centric activities, the patient also develops a brand loyalty towards the brand or towards the company. Personally, I have been instilling uh, for dry eyes, refresh liquid gel. Refresh liquid gel quite a big amount. It's around 150 for a small 10 ml bottle, but I'm using it very regularly. But if you ask me whether I'm brand loyal to this Allergan product, uh, liquid fresh gel, my answer is no. The moment some good company at a lower price comes out with a similar product, I may shift. So, unless had Alargan done some patient centric activity for my problem, maybe I would have stuck on to refresh liquid gel. Let me make a small disclaimer. Whatever names, brand names, or organization names which I may be taking is only for elucidation of the subject, not to promote or run down any brand. That's one disclaimer I thought I should make. And therefore, if you are into patient centric marketing, even the patients can become brand loyal apart from the doctors. The moment the patient becomes your brand advocate, the KOL becomes your brand advocate, the doctor becomes your brand of, you have built a strong brand. So the new shift should be towards patient-centric approach in marketing. That's my take.
Thanks, Vivek sir. I think the point which I want to take out from the concern what Vivek sir is saying is the patient-centric point of view. Prashant sir, what is your point of view when it comes to patient-centric activities in the acute-related business? That's the maximum typical part where patient centricity is something is a challenge for any marketer. So I can understand in the chronic segment, in the super specialty segment, this can be defined very clearly because the patient population is less. You can track the patient. You can give certain kind of patient centric information. What is to be done in acute segment?
Well, I'm another big fan of patient-centric information and data, just like what Vivek sir has been, I think postulating for quite some time now. And the reason why, because I think when I started my career promoting inhalers, and I had no other business but to go and do camps. Conducting a patient camp is far more difficult than conducting a CME. It's extremely difficult, right? And you actually start learning. So the starting point, whether it is acute or any other non-acute kind of product, the starting point is how willing am I as a marketer willing to spend that time and the grind in the market by connecting with patients? The answer is that hardly anybody even talks to a patient. They are rather happy sending multiple forwards in the waiting room or looking into something else, cracking a joke or two, talking to some people, but not connecting with patients. And that's the starting point that I would say. So when Sir said be very patient centric, the answer to a lot of people is, how do I do that? The first and foremost is spend time connecting with patients when you're in the waiting rooms of your field working days. Spend time standing in front of the retail outlet and show your patients to get information. Because the more and more you start talking, the more and more you start understanding what are the pain points that patients have. Is there somebody that does not like a color? Is there somebody that does not like a box, does not like a strip? We need to understand, and all this only happens in the marketplace. It does not happen in probably data sheets. It does not happen in, let's say, prescription research data points. They give you feeders. They give you some kind of an outline. You got to go and test in the market. So in acute therapy, it is extremely important for me to also know, like the chronic, what actually happens with the patient. So what we talk is about an opportunity cost, right? If I'm talking of a doctor, how do I build an opportunity cost for the doctor is something that every marketer and a sales guy needs to understand. I am talking about a doctor who could be a physician. What's the number of patients that he sees? What's the kind of pattern of, let's say, disease that he treats? And based on that, I start valuating an opportunity cost. And each doctor represents an opportunity cost for the organization, for the brands that he promotes. Now, if the people start talking to patients and people around you, start observing buying patterns, start observing, let us say, the entire data matrix that comes in today from e-pharmacies, you will start plotting data a lot more beautifully than normally. And the more information you get, I think you're able to start bucketing your differences for the brands. You're able to start talking to doctors the language that they would love to hear, because that's what the patient's is what he treats. So you're trying to correlate the two very, very actively. So that's an important aspect. Spend time, talk to people. For example, when I raised this in one of my workshops a year back, and it happened to be a multinational, and I had the brand manager say that we're not allowed to do it. I said, what are you not allowed to do? You're not asking the patient his disease profile. You're only asking the patient. So if I go and I'm sitting next to, let's say, both of you are patients sitting there, I could probably just ask you a question, Udit, do you normally come to the doctor every time? Or do you also, let's say, fall back on video consultations? Then I'm beginning to now start profiling my patient. From where do you buy your medicines? Do you buy your medicines from the chemist outdoor, or do you use an e-pharmacy channel? Now, I am beginning to start knowing where should I start looking at patient connector programs. I will be lost if I'm sitting on some data on an Excel sheet without knowing the basis behind that data. So these are some of the techniques which will help you to actually start practicing and implementing patient centricity to the core.
That's a
That's a very important point which you have raised, Prashant. We have to listen to the voice of the patients. So far, we have not been listening to the voice of the patient. In the recently concluded World Pharma Brand Managers Day, we at PharmaState Academy, we interviewed 33 patients, and great majority of these interviews were carried out by brand managers and brand executives. And the kind of insights we got, my God, they were tremendous. We never expected these kind of insights. But if these insights are converted into strategy, a company can have beautiful strategy. Like, for example, one of the patients with who had undergone uh, knee replacement surgery. What did she tell us? अरे बाबा, वो डॉक्टर ने सिर्फ कारपेंटर का काम किया है, लेकिन मेरे को जो सलाह मुझे फिजियोथेरेपिस्ट ने दी, that was something fantastic. And today, when I saw that lady, most of the patients with these kind of problems who after a knee replacement surgery, they have a kind of hobbling walk when they walk. They have a hobbling gait. But this lady, she was almost sprinting, and that was what tempted me to ask her, ऐसा क्या जादू किया आपके डॉक्टर ने? डॉक्टर ने कुछ नहीं किया, doctor has done carpentry work. This is where, if companies can have patient support group, for example, if you have a patient support group for patients with knee replacement surgery, these points could be talked about by a patient to another patient, and the other patient will know how important physiotherapy and strengthening the quadricep muscles is very, very, very important in knee replacement surgery. And this is where pharma companies should take the initiatives in establishing patient support activities. These are the kind of campaigns also we should be launching. Sorry for talking beside the point.
Absolutely, sir. You have made the deliverables very much clear to the team that exactly what kind of the tactical sections you have to make sure that it is directly related to your decision makers and the consumer part of it, so that whatever you do, there is a success coming out of it. Otherwise, what happens sometimes, a lot of flavory marketing campaigns get into dustbin just because there is not a connect happening into it. So that's very important point you mentioned, Vivek sir. Prashant sir, I have very interesting questions coming out of it. Measuring the success of campaign, like what we are talking right now, in terms of patient centricity, is something every pharmaceutical company should focus upon. But when I start relating the success of a campaign, is something very important part, and it is also important that sometimes you cannot relate the marketing campaign with the patient centricity. You try to create a marketing campaigns based on the brand essence story of that particular brand, and then how you can relate that brand with the disease perspective, so that doctors start signifying or remember that this was the campaign and was related to this brand, and they will always remember that. So in that regards, how a pharma company benefits from data driven approach?
Uh, so we have, Indian pharma is very unique. I mean, the top 50 companies dominate 83% of market share, okay, or they contribute 83% to the industry. The top 50 brands contribute only 11% to the industry. Now, 83% on overall sales value and just 11% on the brand value, which only tells you how fragmented we are, as a whole thing. So there's always going to be a struggle or a jostle for a place in the doctor's mindset. Now, how do you do it? We have a problem of plenty. There is a disease of plentiful in our brand campaigns. So my approach that I'm learning now, and probably COVID taught us that. During COVID, many companies made good with just one visual aid for the entire year. There was no rush to create because आप millionaire हो doctors को. So why invest in something? I think it's high time that companies need to start looking at the frequency of campaigns. Number one, don't get into quarterly campaigns. Already many companies have graduated in the last decade from 3 monthly cycles to 4 monthly cycles.
Correct.
Right? Smaller companies have gone into 6 monthly or 8 monthly, depending on their budgets and their expenses. I would want to probably look at brand campaigns at 6 monthly intervals. Just have the campaign run in for 2, and if possible, repeat the campaign with small tweaks which you are learning based on the execution strategy. We like it or no, what we spoke just before we came on live is that the campaign's success depends a lot on the execution factor in India.
Correct.
In India, because we are really talking about varied levels of skill sets amongst reps and managers, it is a challenge for, let's say, the product management team and the senior management team to ensure that the field is extremely well conditioned to carry out campaigns. So your ROI is sometimes less HCP driven, but more the company field force driven. They really determine on what kind of ROIs you will really create. So one, have campaigns that are longer in timeline and have multiple measurements of checking on how it is. Define your metrics. Define them. What is it that I want to measure in the first 2 months of the campaign, in the second 2 months of the campaign, and the last 2 months of the campaign? So what happens is you are not running a race of trying to create a new visual aid, a new campaign, a new utility program every 3 months. Because by the time you finished 1 month of trying to create new ideations, 1 month you go on the market, you're creating the third month, you're getting ready for the next cycle. And that does not allow brand managers to think on what should be the intent and the content of campaign. So one, prolong the campaign duration, increase the consistency of your campaigns, have one or two messaging points that stay for a good couple of years, because it takes time understanding our current capabilities in the field to execute. It takes time to get a campaign across the board. And also to couple, doctors' patients levels have gone very low. So they are not giving you time the way they gave before. So you have to really have the mantra of less is more as a concept to really make your ROIs a lot better.
That's a very important, interesting point you mentioned, Prashant. Now, I know of a company. I was talking to a brand manager and medical representative of a very good company. That medical representative was telling me, "Sir, today I am running 4 campaigns by 4 different brand managers simultaneously." Just imagine 4 different campaigns. I don't know how the brand managers they forget that it's the same person who is running the campaign. Then how do you expect the campaign to be so successful? As far as the Udit question is concerned, how do you measure the success of a campaign? To me, the answer is very simple. It's measured by the increase in the number of prescriptions which are generated. After all, what is pharma selling? Pharma selling is not rupees, annas, and paise. It is just determining how many extra prescriptions I have received. If for a particular campaign, my prescription number today is X, it has increased to X, then my campaign has succeeded. But when you see some of these prescription audit companies like CMAR, SMRC, they are very, very useful. But the only problem is their results come in once in 4 months. So I do not know whether my campaign is effective or not effective. On the other hand, I know of a company from Ahmedabad, which is amongst the top 30 now. That company is hardly 15 years or 20 years in existence. They ran a campaign on 3,500 doctors. And they involved a firm called MyRx. MyRx, I think they have developed a software for that. And from that software, every day they could analyze 75,000 prescriptions. Just imagine from 3,500 doctors, if one can generate from 3,500 doctors, you can analyze, you generate 75,000 prescriptions. The enormity of the prescriptions which are available, from which you can make some deductions on whether my campaign has been successful or not. You have to use artificial intelligence there. You have to use software from companies like what I just mentioned. Measurement is solely dependent upon the increase in the number of prescriptions, and is only through AI, only through software, they can analyze the enormous prescription data which they have. Prescription data is very, very, very important, and analyzing that through companies like MyRx becomes very, very important. So, if you are running a campaign, and if I have to measure how successful is it with after 2 months, in fact, these companies can even give you results within 15 days. And within 15 days, I know as a brand manager whether my campaign is successful or I need to take a different path. I need to modify.
Valid point, Vivek sir. I think the measurement of your execution is something still not been very much well significantly written off in the pharmaceutical industry. We are highly dependent on the very flare data. Even in SMSRC also, the population of doctors which is captured is not too high. So in some of the big brands, though, we can have the good significant insights coming out of it. but when it comes to smaller brands, still it is very immature to take some certain kind of decisions. But certain like MRX, sorry, what you said about MyRx point of view will help us in terms of getting the right insight out of it. A fair point will taken. Prashant sir, any point you would like to add upon into it?
No, I would also look, and for companies who can use technology to really support their agenda, it helps. But let's look at it. And I mean, we all have got probably digitally diseased, if there's a word like that. I mean, we've been digitally diseased over the last 3 years quite often, and today we've made it a point that if in a brand plan or a brand campaign you don't see like a digital element, there are a lot of question marks asked. There are a lot of question marks asked about, do you even know what is required in the market? But what I also would like to look at metrics in terms of measurements. It's time that we start addressing different sets of our field people differently. For example, if you look at the metros, you look at class 1, you look at class 2, and you look at the rest, each of these sets of markets have got a very different dynamic. You really need to start understanding, are you spending time knowing the kind of customers that exist in each of these metrics, and what's the skill set of the team that is actually operating in that market? Because each of this requires a different kind of a dialogue, a different kind of a review, a different kind of a support. And when you can start bifurcating your entire communication of a campaign in these different buckets, your measurements of ROI will be a lot more better and probably a lot more accurate. You will be look at where brand managers today travel. They don't travel to different populations of various kinds of markets that they have. They generally will fall into certain markets which is not ideally a representative market. You need to probably increase your coverage to more representative markets so that you are in a better place to have campaigns that are more effective and thereby measurable.
Absolutely. And today, we
Absolutely.
cannot have a strategy which is the same across the country. I need to have a separate
True.
strategy in Ahmedabad. I need to have a separate strategy in Delhi, Mumbai, and I need to have a separate strategy in Jalandhar. And when you have companies like
True.
MIRX, I can know how effective is my campaign, how effective is my brand is in Jalandhar, and whether my campaign is effective in Ahmedabad. I can have my local strategies in place. And today, local strategies which are in line with the main strategy, they are very, very, very important. It's wrong to have what you call as one size fit all strategy. Today, I have a very peculiar foot size. Size number 7, it doesn't suit me. It's too tight. And size number 8 is too large for me. I need 7.5. But no shoe company gives me 7.5. So similarly, no company can have this kind of one size fit all strategy. I need to have strategies for different cities, and local strategies are going to play a very, very, very important role in the future.
So I think there is some international valid point mentioned by Prashant sir and Vivek sir, and currently we have a good amount of insights in terms of what kind of decision making section in terms of the campaign point of view, how a marketer should think on a broader perspective to make sure the brand goes in the longer vision rather than just the short term part of it. Before going to the next phase of discussion, which is in the question hour, there is a very important segment which we want to cover. Mr. Vivek sir would like to show us a very interesting case study on the brand campaigns. I just say we can
Yeah, can we see the
please.
slide a little later? Can we see the slide a little later? Can we see the slide a little
Over
later?
to you, Vivek sir.
Yeah, can we see the slide a little later? I want to first give a big background to it. Yeah, this was in the year
Okay.
1990 when antidepressants were being widely prescribed by the psychiatrists. At that time, I was working in Sun Pharma, and we had introduced a new brand called product which contained fluoxetine, which is SSRI. Internationally, by Eli Lilly, it was known as Prozac. Sun Pharma was not the first company to introduce. We were the fifth or sixth, and all the bigger companies of that time, Sun Pharma that time was very, very small. They all entered into and there was a rat race amongst the psychiatrists. When I introduced this product, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something different. I spoke even to Ayurvedic doctors. I spoke to number of physicians, consulting cardiologists, consulting diabetologists, endocrinologists. One thing common which was emerging, all these chronic disease, they had an element of anxiety and depression. And in the 1990s, apart from the psychiatrists, even the physicians, the MD doctors, they could not distinguish between depression and anxiety. And they never knew that the both can coexist in chronic disease. Once again, I'm talking about 40 years back, 35 years back. Things have changed now. So the challenge was, how do I stand away from competition? And after a lot of brainstorming, especially with my medical team, we said we will co-promote the brand product in chronic disease along with the main disease. And we'll go and educate the physicians and the other specialists, apart from we will not touch upon the psychiatrist, what depression is and what anxiety is. But that was a big challenge. How can a medical rep go and educate a doctor? So I spoke to our designer and we did a lot of brainstorming. And then one day, the designer suggested, why not find out a caricaturist who can do a job? That was a good opening. Then we went to a caricaturist called Vasant Harbe. Vasant Harbe, as many of the children may be knowing, he was the caricaturist, the cartoonist for the children's magazine Twinkle. We discussed the entire situation with him and told we want to come out with an educational campaign for the non-psychiatrists, for the physicians, for the gastroenterologists, for the endocrinologists. We have to educate them what depression is, but without really educating them. I explained to him what depression is, and then he came out with some beautiful caricatures, which I would like to show now. Can I see those caricatures now? We talked about the many facets of depression, early morning awakening, because depression is connected. Some people wake up late in the morning and even after they sleep for 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, they don't feel refreshed. Some people don't get sleep at all. Some overeat, some undereat and they lose weight. And one of the most famous binge eaters was Lady Diana, the Princess of England. So, can I have the next slide? So, these are the various features of depression which our medical representatives went and told the doctors. The doctors were interested, the medical representatives were interested, and this product PRODEP, it became very, very, very strong amongst the non-psychiatrists. Product went on to be the second brand as per CMARC at that time. But psychiatrists hardly touched the brand. So this campaign we ran for about 2 years. Every time we came out with different visual, all in the form of caricatures, which the medical representatives enjoyed talking, and even the doctors, they enjoyed seeing. So this is one campaign which I still remember even after 35 years. So this is how campaigns can be made successful. We don't have humor in our promotion. We brought in some humor in this promotion. We made the doctors laugh. We made the medical representatives smile. And my God, what tremendous energy they had when they spoke about product to the doctors.
Very important, sir. I think
Small
patient life
little,
cycle is very important to understand and what are the points. I think interesting case study, and I hope every must have taken very good insight out of it. And now going to the very important session, and we have a lots of questions coming from the viewers. Taking the first question from Sudarshan Dalvi, he's asking any example in Indian pharma scenario where brands and RX launch patient education or any adherence program.
once again, the question, please.
Prashant sir, any example in
Yeah.
Indian pharma scenario where brands and RX launched patients education or any adherence program?
Well, I may not recall many brand names, but there are quite a few. I mean, I remember brands launched by, products, especially a lot of respiratory products normally would, bring a lot of patient support programs along with it. Brands in the orthopedic space. Okay, I think when we had Sanofi launching a lot of the long-term products in osteoarthritis or osteoporosis, you had a lot of patient support programs as well. Brands that very typically a lot of products in the prescription market, especially in oncology, have got a lot of patient support programs in terms of trying to support the treatment, trying to support the kind of palliative care. So there are plenty examples, and it all depends on what is the timing of your brand launch in the market, right? You got to really understand where do you stand. Are you in one? Are you the leader company in a therapy? Then it makes a lot of sense. If not, are you having a very strong differentiator in the market, which will allow you to add on a patient adherence program to really, make your promotion a lot more holistic? These could be occasions when you can actually consider getting into patient support programs. The only word of caution: please don't start anything which is going to not see more than a 5 or a 10 year kind of a gestation time. I mean, you've got to believe that patient adherence programs and patient programs take time. It's like a digital program, right? We seem to have got quite tired out of the digital journeys, and we have let's say downwashed a lot of these kind of concepts. So in patient programs, you got to have a long term vision. Do not worry about, have some metrics that are very clear, in the sense, what is the kind of reach that you're doing to patients, what's the kind of patients getting enrolled, what's the kind of visibility you want to drive through these patient programs. Keep all that in mind, and today with social media being so powerful, you can actually start carving out interesting patient adherence programs for any prescription brand.
One brand I know which succeeded
Fantastic.
only through patient centric activity was one of the I would say this is perhaps the most successful brand of the 21st century, at least in India, and that is Genevia and Genumet. Genevia and Genumet, I think, was introduced somewhere in 2007 or 2008, and they simultaneously ran a patient-centered program called Sparsh. Remember, 2007 and 8 were the days when even a mobile phone was not available, and all these patient-centric activities were carried out through telecalls. Qualified counselors were made to sit and listen to the patients. And these patients approach these counselors only through the doctors, where all information about diabetes, all information about diet, etc., was given by these counselors. And this patient-centric activity of Genevia and Genumet by MSD took that brand to a new level. Today, even after the introduction of Galvus and two brands by Abbott, which is now with another company, and co-marketing with the USVP also, all these three brands today are not even 50% of the market share of Genevia. This is one example which immediately comes to my mind when you talk about the success of patient-centric marketing.
Very true, sir. Another question which we have: do you feel prescription brand personality can create impact among patients? And if we want to focus towards a brand building among patients,
Once again, come again. What is the
exactly,
question?
it's like how you can increase, how you increase or inclinate your marketing towards the patient's point of view rather than doctor's point of view, and will it be successful?
At least I can say that Genuine was a big success. And in the coming days, where we have more of biosimilar and biopharma products, this patient-centric activity is going to play a very, very, very important role. In fact, many may not remember, the first patient-centric activity was carried out uh, not by this insulin company, which I
Mhm.
forgot the name of the company, the Danish company.
No,
Uh,
not us.
no, not Novo Nordisk. The first patient-centric activity was conducted by an Indian company, and the company's name is Cipla. Cipla, when they introduced inhalers, counselors used to sit
Mhm.
outside the doctor's chamber, and these counselors used to explain to the patient how to use an inhaler. I've seen it many times when I was working the field as a first line manager, as a regional manager. Patients of the counselors of Cipla sitting outside the doctor chamber, because in those days people were still, not very familiar what inhalers are, and the patients had to be educated on how to use an inhaler. And Cipla, I must take pride, although I never worked in Cipla any time, but Cipla being an Indian company, the concept of patient-centric market was brought by Cipla. That's my take.
Sure. Udit, just to add, I think it's important for marketers to note that not all brands require patient education. I mean, let's not paint the whole town with the same brush. It all depends on what is your brand character. Okay, is your brand falling in a segment that requires patient education? Is number one. Is your brand having a differentiation that needs to be passed on to patients? Is number two. And number three is your brand so large that the number of prescriptions are declining but sales are increasing, which probably can be a case in point for a brand to go OTX. Now that's where patient visibility will need to start getting better. So when you start bucketing your brands into these various kinds, you will actually know, because for a brand that's very small in size, you will not have funds to even do patient education. So we got to be extremely careful on which brands. It's like not every brand needs digital, not every brand needs a patient education agenda.
Yeah, because the smaller brands need a lot of in clinic oriented campaigns where they can have better visibility point of view, so that once that has been very much well established, then you can take the next level risk that would you like to go more in terms of the same kind of activity, or you would like to add something which is patient oriented, not related to the brand but related to the doctor's practitioner's prescription behavior.
True that.
That's very true. That's very true. Another question we are getting is, if you are a new entrant into a crowded space, what should I do first? Advice for HCP advisory board. What do you think? Do a qualitative interviews help?
Mhm.
So they are trying to.
Uh,
The question is more about that. If any brand they are trying to introduce, what is the first step they should take to understand the overall market space in that cluttered market? And does that HCP kind of advisory boards really works to get a qualitative feedback?
well, you don't need an advisory board to get qualitative feedback. Okay, I mean, you got to really spend time doing a lot of pre-launch activities, spend time understanding your target audience, spend time understanding, is there a gap that you can actually utilize in your marketing campaigns, spend time training your people in terms of how beautifully they can execute, because it's a crowded market. Okay, have a very very intense activity driven agenda for at least the first 6 months to 9 months, and
Mm.
do not deviate from the plan if you've done your homework right. Because See, an ad board is looks very good on the CV, but it's not very easy. And I think doctors today don't fall for it. 10 years back, I remember when I was handling some derma cluster, I walked up to one very important dermatologist and I said, "Sir, I would like you to be a part of the ad board." The first question he asked is, "Tell me the agenda for the next 1 year. What is it? Do not waste your time. Do not waste my time. Do not waste company money." And he literally, he didn't, just because I knew him, he did not kick me off, but he said, and he just had walked off another big MNC's ad board after serving it for 10 years and said it was all humbug that happens there. So see, doctors, if you want good quality doctors, okay, ad boards, we all know in the pharma has got different connotations, right? Why do you put an ad board in the first place? You have a lot of reasons for it. If it's for the right reason, which is getting expert opinion,
Right.
getting advocacy for your brand and therapy, then I think do it a lot more proactively. Do not do it as a reaction mode. And in a crowded market, I don't think ad boards are the way to go. You got to spend time on superior execution, a much more smarter campaign. For example, the one that Sir showed is have something innovative, right, which is going to enthuse your rep so that they have that courage to go into the market and put their neck out and say that we are the latest and not the late ones.
A lot of insights have been captured, and most of the questions which have been asked covered the queries, I think, and very much well conceptualized way of answering the exact challenges in the market. What are the key things which every brand marketeer should understand from the context of where the brand is currently, maybe in the initial part, on the top of the part, or in the which kind of PLC cycle. The most important perspective is have a route of your brand to be understood based on the HCP point of view, your stakeholder point of view, and ensure that whatever campaigns you want to run, it should have the right acceptance from every stakeholders. That's something which we have to gear upon. So as we are on the verge of ending the session, we really would like to have a small right conclusion message from both of you, sir, to give the right context to all of the viewers that exactly what are the key things they should do always, every day, to make sure there is a quality and there is an acceptance. There should not be perfectionism, but perfectionism is also is equal to what you can say perception. So this has to be entangled very much. So over to Vivek, sir. What is your last conclusive message for the session, sir?
My my last message would be learn to differentiate. Learn
Yes.
to differentiate. If I'm able to differentiate, I have won the game. And I can give you one example from Udit's company. That product was, the 15th or 16th brand of ofloxacin which was introduced. Ofloxacin ordinary combination which was introduced. Dr. Reddy's was not the first company. And all the other brands, they were entrenched and fighting amongst the surgeons, ortho surgeons, chest physicians. But the brilliant team at Dr. Reddy, they found a gap. They found a gap. Dentists who had a high potential to prescribe this product were never touched by the other 15 competitors. So they decided to have the entire campaign toward dentists. See where the campaign started. The campaign started right from the state of conceptualization of the product, right from giving the brand name. They gave the brand name Ordent. The moment you heard about Ordent, the dentists feel, my God, it's a product for us. But the team at DRL did not stop there. Even the strip of the tablet was in the form of a tooth. The strip of a tablet was in the form of a tooth. And the campaign they run, I understand one of the brand managers telling me that at one time they had captured over 85 to 90% of the prescriptions from the dentists. Of course, they did not move on to other segments, but in the dental segment, that campaign was so powerful. Just imagine 85 to 90% share in a good segment. This is one campaign which, I have also mentioned in one of my textbooks.
I think a very
So
valid point, sir.
differentiate and then run the campaign.
Same thing. I also figured out in Pan D brand also. Whole the gastroenterology companies working on the gastro part. They were the one who get into the nose of other specialities where this is a quite common issues, and they build their brand from there. But that perspective, now they are the market leaders. Yeah, Prashant sir.
Well, I would try and look at it as, let's say, use three levers. I mean, let every marketeer try and build on the power of three. And the way I would like to look at the power of three is spend more time understanding the HCPs, spend more time understanding the geographies that you operate, spend more time understanding patient patterns. What are the patient dynamics that are changing? So these are the three homeworks that need to be done in a larger, newer perspective at all points of time. And when you have this data ready, the campaigns can be more tailor-made, campaigns can be more executable, and campaigns can be more measurable. So the power of three will actually start making your campaigns actually, bet the money that has been invested, the time that has been invested, and the hope of market share gains that the company is actually gunning for.
Brilliant session and absolute excellent insights. Even it will really help me also in coming days to identify the nudges and gaps, and how I make sure that I can, screw the areas of gaps in the implementation of campaigns perspective, because that's the very important task for every pharma brand marketer. They should ask whenever they're trying to plan something, so what? They will get something out of it or not. And I think very well noble advice from two excellent eminent industry leaders who have seen the industry evolving from the basic science to the converting into the marketing angle. Thank you so much, sir, for giving such an important time of yours. And it was a great discussion today, and we captured good amount of insights for all of the viewers. And I think we are now, you can end the session, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for everyone to watch this particular session. Thank you so much.